No. This is outrageous. Judge Mason's cold, sharp voice shattered the heavy silence in the courtroom. She slammed her hand down on the table, her furious gaze sweeping over everyone in the room, as if trying desperately to hold on to the power that was slipping through her fingers. But no one spoke up in support. Not a single person. Gone were the flattery, gone were the nods of agreement from before. The room fell into complete silence, with all eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in front of them, their gazes a mix of disbelief, anger, and a hint of satisfaction. Judge Mason had always been the one in control of this room. But today she was no longer the one calling the shots. In the front, James Carter stood still, calm and resolute, as if he had predicted every move she would make. The USSS badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of the truth now revealed. No one in the courtroom could deny the undeniable. She had lost. Mason shook her head, her lips trembling, but she fought to maintain her composure. I will not be humiliated like this. I am the judge of this court. You have no right. Jacob Turner, the assistant prosecutor, interrupted her in a cold, unwavering voice. No one stands above the law, Judge Mason. The air in the courtroom grew even heavier. Some had stopped breathing. The reporters were tense, capturing every moment. In this moment, it became clear, true power doesn't come from titles or seats of power, it comes from the truth. And if you believe that justice always finds a way to speak, leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about this case? Was justice truly served? If you believe in the power of truth, hit subscribe to join us as we uncover the next stories. But first, let's rewind to when it all began. Special Agent James Carter straightened his silk tie, feeling the tension in every thread. He knew that in a few minutes, everything Judge Mason believed she understood about power would come crashing down. In his breast pocket, his Secret Service badge seemed heavier than ever, its weight only rivaled by the file of evidence in his hand, a weight too much to bear, containing secrets that would expose years of corruption within the judicial system. He stood at the defendant's table, his gaze sweeping over those around him, allowing himself a slight, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile tinged with sarcasm, a quiet reflection of the absurdity of the moment. The irony of this situation struck him hard. It was a blow to the truth that the entire judicial system had tried to keep hidden for so long. What they thought was solid and immovable was about to collapse in a single instant. Welcome to the Mason True Justice Chronicles, where today's story reminds us that justice wears many faces. The announcement echoed, almost as if underscoring the impending change, the secrets that were about to be unveiled. In the sunlit corridors of the Maplewood Courthouse, a scene was about to unfold. One that would remind everyone, from the seasoned lawyers to the young, eager prosecutors, that no one stands above the law. Judge Mason, a figure of long-held respect, gazed down from her bench. Her lips curled into a sneer, the kind of expression she often reserved for those she deemed beneath her. What she didn't know was that the empire of bias and bribery she had built over the years was on the verge of crumbling. The well-dressed black man standing before her was no nameless figure in her unjust machine. He was the reckoning she would soon face. Judge Mason's eyes remained haughty, but an indescribable sensation stirred in her chest. It wasn't fear, it was unease, as though a cold gust had unexpectedly swept through the room, tightening her body and choking her throat. Her hands, which had always been steady on the bench, suddenly felt as heavy as an unbearable burden. The tension in courtroom 156 was palpable, like static before a storm. James Carter felt the eyes of everyone in the room on him, wondering how he managed to stay composed in the face of one of the most powerful judges in New York. 6 months of undercover work had taught him a lesson in patience, a kind of patience born from witnessing daily injustices while he diligently built an unshakable case. Judge Mason sat at her elevated seat, her delicate fingers gliding lightly over the surface of the desk, creating a languid rhythm. This was a habit James had witnessed countless times throughout his investigation. Every time she did this, he knew a harsh sentence was about to be delivered. Those hands were often a forewarning of ruthless judgments, especially for those she deemed unworthy of justice. When the defendant, someone like him, stood before her, Judge Mason curled her lips into a sneer, drawing out her words with a barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Carter, enlighten us as to why you're any different from the others who've stood here before." James inhaled deeply, feeling the cold air fill his lungs. The faces of good people who had once stood in this very place flashed through his mind, crushed under the weight of prejudices cloaked in the guise of justice. They had fallen before impassive and unjust rulings. He clenched his jaw, steadying his voice like steel. "Your Honor, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about my role here. Today." Judge Mason's eyebrows arched slightly, her usually controlled demeanor wavering for just a moment, as though a concrete wall had just cracked under the unexpected weight of James's words. It was the first crack in her cold armor, and James knew exactly how to widen it. Slowly, he reached toward his jacket pocket, his motion deliberate yet resolute. The air in the room seemed to compress. A few of the people standing nearby instinctively tightened their stance, their eyes locked on his hand, tense, as though anticipating something unexpected. A police officer placed his hand lightly on his sidearm, ready to react. Every movement James made was calculated, not a single gesture wasted, much like the entire plan of this investigation. "I'm not the defendant, Your Honor," James said, his tone calm but as sharp as a blade. He skillfully withdrew his badge from his pocket, the motion smooth and confident. The gleaming emblem caught the harsh fluorescent lights, reflecting the truth into every corner of the courtroom. The small beams of light seemed to rip through the dense atmosphere, awakening the astonishment on Judge Mason's face and on the faces of everyone witnessing this moment. The silence that followed was so thick it seemed to swallow the entire room. Judge Mason's face shifted in a complex dance of emotions: astonishment, fury, fear, and finally, a bitter realization that the world she had so carefully crafted was beginning to unravel. Her meticulously groomed fingers were no longer tapping rhythmically on the desk. They clenched the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles turned pale with the strain. "This is absurd," she declared, but her voice had lost its former authority. James heard the tremor in her voice, the familiar sound he'd heard from the arrogant, those who once thought they were untouchable, until the moment they were faced with the harsh truth that they were no longer invincible. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jacob Turner, recognizing the perfect moment, stood up from the gallery, his face calm but his eyes sharp, cutting through the chaos that had just erupted. Jacob's presence added another layer of heavy tension to the already charged atmosphere in the courtroom. "The evidence tells a different story, Your Honor," he stated, each word striking the air like a hammer on an anvil, sharp and irrefutable. 6 months of surveillance had captured all the patterns of discrimination, financial traces, leading to covert kickbacks from private prisons, all meticulously gathered and undeniable. The young prosecutor sitting at the bench had stopped writing, her pen frozen midair, as though frozen in time when she realized the horrible truth. Perhaps every case she had ever handled had been tainted by injustice. The guard beside the judge had also shifted his stance, moving just slightly away, creating distance, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one laden with meaning as the judge's power began to waver. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers hovering over the stenotype machine, uncertain whether to record this historic moment for posterity. James slowly pulled a sealed envelope from the file, the motion deliberate but decisive, as if affirming the gravity of what was about to unfold. He placed the envelope on the desk before Judge Mason, his voice ringing out with authority. "The Justice Department's investigation report, Your Honor." Each piece of evidence James presented was like a direct blow to Judge Mason's reputation. Her hand trembled slightly, her lips losing their former rigidity as he continued. "Minutes from your closed-door meetings with prison wardens, foreign bank account records, and statistical analyses show a systemic bias in your rulings." The words rang out like hammer strikes, each one igniting a wave of murmurs through the courtroom. Whispers snaked their way through the rows, growing louder like the sound of crashing waves, reflecting the bottled-up anger and pain that had been festering for years. The parents of children who had received harsh sentences for minor offenses sat up straighter, their eyes a mix of validation and sorrow. They had suspected for a long time, but now, the truth was laid bare, and their hearts weighed heavy. A mother in the back row subtly wiped the tears that silently streamed down her cheek. In her hand, she held a photograph of her son, who had been sentenced to 10 years for a mistake that should have warranted nothing more than probation. Her fingers tightened around the picture frame, as if to hold on to the memory of the innocent boy before his life had been engulfed by injustice. "You are immediately removed from office," Turner declared, his tone final, like a gavel striking the foundation of justice. He nodded toward the federal agents who had suddenly appeared at the door of the courtroom. "These officers will escort you out." His words reverberated through the courtroom, carrying with them the weight of years of injustice finally exposed. Judge Mason's final moments on the throne of power were nothing short of a complete collapse. Her face stiffened, her eyes wide in disbelief, as though she had just been ripped from a dream of power. The mask of authority she had always maintained shattered beyond repair. Her lips quivered as if trying to speak, but no words escaped. Her once proud hand, which had gripped the gavel of power, now hung limply by her side. The gavel, a symbol of the authority she had so fiercely clung to, now lay discarded, cold, and forgotten on the wooden table. Every eye in the courtroom was on her, devoid of any sympathy, replaced only by anger and relief at the realization that justice had finally spoken. As she was escorted away, each heavy step echoed in the stillness of the courtroom. The sound of her expensive high heels, once a symbol of her power, now only weakly clicked as she withdrew from the system she had corrupted. James stood still, watching, his gaze composed but ice-cold. A sense of satisfaction crept through his mind like a passing breeze, but it was quickly replaced by thoughts of what came next. Mason was just a small piece of the larger picture, a single thread in the sordid tapestry of corruption that needed to be unraveled from its roots. He glanced at Turner, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. Their work was far from over. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere had become charged as the news spread. Whispers rippled through the crowd, growing louder like a rising wave, carrying with it a sense of shock, fury, and even a faint flicker of hope for change. The long corridors of the courthouse now seemed suspended in time, filled with the weight of past cases that needed to be revisited. Many lives would have to be rebuilt from the shattered fragments of injustice, and faith in the legal system would have to be restored step by step. But today marked the beginning, a reminder that justice is not just etched in the walls of the courthouse but is a living principle that requires constant vigilance. Outside, the New York sun beat down on the courthouse steps, sharpening every detail, making everything feel stark and unforgiving. A crowd of reporters had gathered, their eyes sharp as they hunted for any scrap of information, waiting for the next detail to feed into their sensational headlines. James, not wanting to be the center of attention, veered into a side exit of the courthouse. His steps were steady but cautious. This was not a journey to seek fame or personal glory. For him, it all boiled down to restoration, restoring faith, justice, and the lives trampled by corruption. As he made his way toward the car, James felt each steady breath fill the still afternoon air. A light breeze swept by, causing his tie to flutter slightly against his chest. His phone buzzed unexpectedly in his pocket, breaking the silence. The screen flashed with a message from headquarters. Another judge, another court, and a new investigation was beginning. He paused, his eyes scanning the message. His fingers tightened around the phone for a brief moment, as if drawing strength from his own unshakable commitment. A faint smile tugged at his lips, and he straightened his tie, a small but deliberate gesture, as though preparing for the next battle. Justice, real justice, can still prevail, he murmured to himself, his steps growing firmer. Somewhere out there, someone believed their power was invincible, that no one would see their wrongdoing or care enough to stop it. They were wrong. James would make sure of that. In the end, true justice knows no boundaries, is never biased, and certainly will not bow to corruption. It only needs those brave enough to stand up and fight for it, case by case. Over his 15 years of service, James had witnessed too many judges corrupted by power. Each case only reinforced his resolve, from the small-town judge trading verdicts for favors, to the high court judge who saw themselves as the lord over the fates of children. But today's victory felt different. Perhaps it was because of Judge Mason's fall. As he reflected on the battles fought, the muscles in his shoulders seemed to tense, as if the burdens of all those years had never lifted. The sleepless nights, the overwhelming stress, and the pressure that sometimes made his hands clench into fists. But today, the sunlight poured down on the courthouse, brightening moments that once seemed hopeless. Justice, though slow, had found its way. And when he looked toward Judge Mason, now being led out of the courtroom, her footsteps echoed in the silence. James felt a profound shift. She no longer held power, no longer wielded the life or death of so many. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed tightly together. This was not just the end of a trial, it was the beginning of something far greater. It proved that even the most entrenched systems in society could be shaken when good people refused to turn away. As he drove home, James passed by the community center, the place where it all began, where the tears of a mother over her son's unjust sentence sparked this investigation. He suddenly stopped the car, looking at the scene of families bustling in to join evening programs. This was why his work mattered. Not for medals or headlines, but for the healing of a community, for rebuilding trust, one case at a time. Looking at the families gathering, James felt a surge of warmth, not from rush or exhaustion, but from peace, a deep awareness that his work was not just about winning legal battles, but about helping the community regain faith in justice. It was a sense of relief, like a cool breeze through his mind. The real-life stories, the things he had witnessed, were powerful reminders that change is possible. When we stand up for what's right, a strong belief wells up within us, like a wave that calms the mind. It feels as though anything good can be achieved if we stay true to our values. Our trust in truth and justice grows stronger when we see the community's growth. With every registration, like a milestone, a person believes again in the power of truth and justice. A warm sensation spread through him, like witnessing a crowd come together at a meeting, not because they have the same goal, but because they share the same beliefs. Each registration felt like an affirmation that we are not alone in this fight, that there are people willing to do what's right even when it's difficult. We're almost at 10,000 signups, each one representing someone who believes in the power of truth and justice. If this story resonates with you, hit the sign up button and share it with others who need to hear that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, can change lives. A wave of relief and pride filled him as these words echoed in his mind. It felt as though his efforts were truly making a difference, not just for himself, but for others as well. Change is not always easy, but it is possible. And together, we can protect and spread stories like James's, so they continue to inspire, bring hope, and show courage in the face of injustice. This story serves as a reminder that fairness and courage can transform everything. Have you ever stood up for what is right, even when you knew it wouldn't be easy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Each of your stories could inspire someone else and contribute to positive change. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with friends and family so we can all spread the message of justice and perseverance. Thank you for following and supporting. Let's continue taking action together to create a fairer, more hopeful world. Wishing you strength, energy, and progress every step of the way. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding.